morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. It's day 3 of the daily language learning diary. I've got my favorite sweater on today, which is from one of my favorite coffee roasters in San Francisco called Andytown. Now, related to that, on yesterday's video, Richie, who's learning Thai, said, unrelated, but I wish I could steam milk at home for my coffee. Sad face. Getting a bit sick of black. You know that way? Well, you know what, Richie? We are all in this daily language learning diary together. We're in this language learning journey together. So I'm not gonna leave you hanging. I'm gonna give you a little surprise today. So Richie, here's a flat white on your behalf. I'm gonna drink it, I'm gonna enjoy it. And for everybody, cheers. I have to say again, honestly, thank all of you who watched the first 2 days and who commented on yesterday's video. I'm having so much fun. I love this daily language diary series. It's awesome. So thank you for all the questions as well. Today we're going to answer a question from Silent Jaguar 68. Now, Silent Jaguar has been commenting for a long time and left a really good question, but don't worry, I'm going to try to get to all the questions. I'm just going to put them on a list and we'll go through them every single day. So please keep the questions coming. So Silent Jaguar says, "Hi Robin, I actually thought of a question regarding something I got stuck with a while back. Word order. I've noticed this a little bit in Russian, but a lot more in Hungarian. That with how the grammar works, certain parts of the sentence could be in totally different spots to what you expected. My question then is, how do you go about learning and internalizing a foreign language's word order, especially when it's nothing like your own?" Now, I think this is a really good question, Richie, and to be honest, I think that again, usually this is one where I'd spend loads of time thinking carefully and putting together different perspectives. For today, I'm going to give you the first sort of technique that really comes to my mind and one that helped me a lot when it came to languages like Japanese, for example, or even German, where the word order can be very different than English, which is my native language. But I think this is another wonderful opportunity for people to please leave comments in this video and let me know what techniques you have found helpful, because there are a lot of ways to do this, and I think that we'll all get the most value if everyone shares what's worked for them. So people who are a bit newer to this can get a really rich sort of selection of things to try. It's bloody good. I love it. Okay, so for me, I think the first and most sort of interesting technique that really jumps out that I have used a lot is this sort of pattern drilling technique. Now this works for any language, but it's especially helpful with languages. Like I said, in my case, Japanese was a really, really big one, because in Japanese, the word order is completely different than English, and the verb always comes at the end, for example, but there are also these things called particles, so grammatical particles that sort of indicate the significance of a particular word in the sentence. It's complex. Now, really quickly, I want to share one of my absolute core language learning principles with you right now, which is I always say it's better to be able to do a lot with a little bit of language. Now, again, I think this is important when you're learning any language. I think it's far more helpful to take a small amount of language and become able to use it very flexibly, to be able to say a lot of things with that small amount of language. I feel like as you start to learn thousands and thousands of words and grammatical structures and things that are all sort of in their own vacuums, I feel like it becomes quite a cognitive burden, so that when you actually try to speak and try to express yourself, and so for example, with this word order, which is very different than your own language, there's an enormous cognitive burden because you're sort of sifting through thousands of words that you've kind of learned, but you've never really use them in a sentence, I think you're far better off to keep that cognitive load lighter in terms of the words you're searching for. So that's just a general principle for people who are starting out. Richie, I think it sounds like you might be a little bit more advanced perhaps with Thai. Now, the way I see it, there are two sort of main phases of this pattern drilling exercise that you kind of go through in a loop, and you just continue building and building and building with each new iteration. And this is why I told you that principle, because what we're going to be able to do here is we're going to be able to say a lot of things with a fairly small amount of language and vocabulary and even different sentence structures. So I would start with a sentence that is fairly simple. So let's take Japanese. This is gonna be a little tricky and I don't want to do too much editing for these daily diary videos, but let's take the sentence, watashi wa ikimasu. So watashi is I, wa is a subject particle, so it indicates the subject of the sentence. Ikimasu is a verb to go. So this is a very, very simple sentence, but it already starts to sort of encompass this core grammatical feature of Japanese word order, right? So watashi wa goes at the beginning, ikimasu, the verb is at the end. Now, the first thing I would do if this is not already a comfortable sentence for me is start saying like different subjects, start using different verbs. So, watashi wa nomimasu, watashi wa tabemasu, right? Just drill that in, and the idea here, the important thing is that you are switching the different components of the sentence around. But now let's say, here's phase 2. So now we add a single layer of complexity. So for example, watashi wa gakkou ni ikimasu. So I go to the school, right? Or I go to school. So now we have this interesting middle piece, right? So we have watashi wa, I, gakkou ni. So gakkou is school, and then ni is this sort of direction particle, so indicating that we're going to the school, right? And then the verb is still at the end. So again, we have a pretty simple sentence here, watashi wa gakkou ni ikimasu. But again, this is really, really critical because it's encompassing this really core feature of Japanese word order. And so now what you can do is you can say so many things, even with just like 20 different, like 10 or 15 places and 10 or 15 verbs, you can do so many things. So you can say, I go to school, I go to the movie theater, I go to the restaurant, I go to the cafe. But then of course you can change the verb and you could say, I walk to the restaurant, I run to the cafe, right? I drive to school. And then we go through another cycle where we add a layer of complexity. So maybe now we want to say something like, I eat at the restaurant, right? Or like, I study at school. Watashi wa gakkou de benkyou shimasu, right? So now we have this idea of watashi wa, right? I, gakkou de. So now we have this de particle, which allows us to say sort of like where we're gonna do an action in a certain place, right? So, watashi wa gakkou de benkyou shimasu. So now we have all kinds of stuff. So again, it's a very simple sentence. We haven't really introduced a massive amount of complexity, but again, now we can say things like, I drink at the restaurant, I eat at the restaurant, I watch a movie at the movie theater, I study at home. And so what I would be doing is I would be constantly sort of doing this pattern drilling. I know that it's kind of a drill, right? And so a lot of times we try to talk about, let's get away from a lot of these techniques that they use at school. But I think drilling vocabulary is one thing, but drilling sort of grammatical patterns and word order, I think is actually really helpful. And especially in a language where the word order is very different than your own language. And so in this example, the next iteration would be, I drink water at the restaurant, right? I eat food at the restaurant. I study Japanese at school. So now we're adding just one more layer of complexity. So even after just 4 or 5 iterations here, we've got like some fairly complex sentences. Now, here's the last important thing I'll say about this. If you'll notice, even with these relatively simple sentences I just gave you, in the case of Japanese, we have got a really nice selection, and I don't think you need to get more complex than that. I don't think you need to be making incredibly complex Japanese sentences or Thai sentences or Russian sentences in order to master the word order, or at least start to really get comfortable with it. Again, I think if you start trying to do too many iterations and adding too much complexity, the cognitive burden becomes very high. So I go back to my original core language learning principle. It's better to be able and comfortable saying a lot of things with a small amount of language. So my advice to you, Richie, would be to try to get incredibly comfortable with sentences of around that type of complexity, because I think once you're incredibly comfortable, and it's really easy to say things like, I study Japanese at university every day. If you can say that in Thai and you're incredibly comfortable with it, I think that you'll find it fairly easy to then build and start making much more complex sentences. But it's important to become comfortable saying those type of sentences with that complex or different word order. And I think after that, you'll have a great foundation to succeed. Okay, everybody, thank you again for all of your support and for following along this daily series. I can't wait to see you tomorrow, and we'll answer another question from the comments. Happy Wednesday.